Hello.
It was supposed to be a quick stop. Just a 10-minute detour on my way home to drop off my friend's laptop charger. The one he'd left at my place during our late-night gaming session the day before. I didn't expect anyone to even be home besides him. No plans. No tension. No her. I pulled into their driveway just after 6 p.m. The house looked quiet from the outside. Lights on in the kitchen, curtains drawn in the living room. I knocked out of habit and was already reaching for the doorknob when the door opened. But it wasn't Daniel who answered. It was his mom, Eva. I hadn't seen her up close in months. Not like this. Not without the buffer of a holiday barbecue or her quick wave from the front porch. She looked different than I remembered. More relaxed, maybe. Still in her work clothes, but barefoot. Her blouse was slightly untucked, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Hair pulled into a loose bun, a few strands hanging down over her cheek. No makeup, but she didn't need it. "Oh, hey," she said, surprised, blinking. "You startled me." "Hey, Mrs. Collins," I stammered, suddenly forgetting the entire English language. Just dropping this off. Daniel left it." She smiled, brushing the loose hair behind her ear. "Call me Ava, and come in. He's upstairs, probably buried in laundry or his phone." I stepped inside, trying not to feel awkward. The familiar scent of vanilla and laundry detergent hit me instantly. Warm. Lived in. "Thanks," I said, holding up the charger like some kind of peace offering. "You want something to drink while you wait?" "He'll be a minute." "I'm good," I said out of reflex. But she was already moving toward the kitchen. I watched her go. She moved like someone who didn't realize anyone was watching. Comfortable, tired, but graceful in a way I couldn't define. "Water? Juice?" she asked over her shoulder. "Water's good," I managed. She handed me a cold glass and leaned against the counter, watching me with those warm, light brown eyes. "You're here a lot less than you used to be," she said casually. I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, well, we're both kind of doing our own thing lately." She nodded, sipping from her own glass. "Time does that. People grow up." Before I could reply, Daniel thundered down the stairs barefoot, his hair a mess. "Dude," he barked. "I've been looking for that everywhere." I tossed him the charger. "You left it plugged in at my place." "Lifesaver," he muttered, then glanced toward the hallway. "Hey, Mom, I'm gonna run to Jamie's for a bit. Cool?" She raised an eyebrow. "Dinner. I'll grab something there." She sighed like she wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. "Fine. Don't be out too late." And then, just like that, he was gone. Hoodie half-zipped, keys jangling, the door clicking shut behind him. A gust of cool air and the thud of his car door. Then silence. And me, still holding my glass of water in her kitchen. Ava blinked, as if suddenly realizing we were alone. "You don't have to run off," she said, smiling faintly. "Unless you've got plans?" I hesitated. I didn't, but something in the way she said it felt different. Not flirty, not inappropriate, just open, like she didn't mind the company. "Not really," I shrugged. "It's Friday. Thought I'd relax." "Well," she said, turning to the cabinet, "I just opened a bottle of wine. Feel like earning a glass." I raised an eyebrow. "Earning?" "There's a shelf in the laundry room that's been mocking me for weeks. Wobbly as hell. If you help me tighten it, you can stay for a glass." I laughed. "That's your idea of a fair trade?" "I'm a single mom, Nate," she said dryly. "Bartering is how I survive." Something about the way she said it made me smile. The laundry room was warmer than I expected, and the shelf turned out to be more stubborn than she let on. But between the two of us, a screwdriver, and a lot of sarcastic commentary, we got it fixed. By the time we stepped back into the kitchen, it was nearly 8 p.m. The lights were dimmer now. She'd turned on a small lamp in the corner instead of the overheads, and the soft glow made the space feel smaller, quieter. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one without asking again. "To functional shelves," she said, raising hers. "To expert craftsmanship," I replied, tapping mine against hers. We talked. At first, it was small things. Music, Daniel's terrible driving, the neighbor's never-ending construction. But eventually it shifted. She told me about her job, how exhausting her week had been, how she sometimes wished she could take a week off from everything. "I love my son," she said, "but being mom 24/7, sometimes it makes you forget you're anything else." There was a silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just real. "You ever feel like that?" she asked. "Like people only see one version of you?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, all the time, actually." She looked at me and I felt it, that click. That quiet little moment where two people stop being polite strangers and become something else. Not friends, not lovers, just two people who see each other. The clock ticked past 9:30. The wine bottle was nearly empty. "You probably need to get going," she said, though her tone didn't insist. "Probably," I said, but neither of us moved. The kitchen was warm, quiet. Her eyes lingered on mine a little too long. She stood to collect the glasses, and I stood too, unsure if I should thank her, offer a hug, or just back away and vanish like nothing had happened. Then she turned to me, calm, close, unreadable, and said, "You can stay a bit longer, if you want." I told myself I'd only stay for a few more minutes, just long enough to not make things awkward, just long enough to seem polite. But the minutes stretched like warm honey, slow and sticky, refusing to let go. Ava lit a single candle on the dining table as she passed by it. Maybe out of habit, maybe just to add light without flicking on anything too bright. The flame danced in the small glass holder, casting little golden reflections along the kitchen walls. It was such a small thing, but I felt it. The atmosphere had changed. Or maybe I had. She moved around the kitchen easily, barefoot on the tile, her sleeves still rolled up from earlier. The wine had taken the edge off both of us. Her laugh came quicker now. So did mine. It didn't feel like I was talking to someone's mom anymore. Felt like I was talking to a woman. "So," she said, leaning against the counter, "is college everything you hoped it would be?" I chuckled. "Not really. I mean, some classes are cool, but mostly it's just stress, overpriced coffee, and group projects where I end up doing all the work." She laughed. "Sounds about right. And your major?" "Communications," I said. "Might switch to something else. I don't know. Half the time I feel like I'm just drifting." She nodded slowly. "That doesn't change. You think when you're older it all makes sense, but it doesn't." I looked at her. Her gaze drifted toward the candlelight. She seemed distant for a second, somewhere between memory and confession. "Do you ever regret anything?" I asked before I could stop myself. She blinked. "What kind of question is that?" "Sorry. I just mean, like, did you ever wish you'd done things differently?" She tilted her head, considering it. "Sometimes. I used to dance. Nothing professional, just something I loved. But then Daniel came and life took a different path. His father and I tried to make it work. But you know how that ended? I nodded. I remembered vaguely when they split. Daniel had stayed over at my place for a weekend because things were tense at home. I didn't understand it then. I was maybe 15. But now, I felt the weight of what she didn't say. "You seem like a really good mom," I said softly. She smiled, but it was tinged with something else. "Thanks. I try. Doesn't always feel like enough." The room settled into silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was gentle, the kind of silence that follows honesty. I noticed her hands, soft but strong, fingers curled around the edge of her wine glass. She wasn't wearing any jewelry, no rings, no watch, just that thin blue bracelet she always had on. Something Daniel had made her in elementary school, I think. "I'm glad you stayed," she said suddenly. Her voice was quiet, but not unsure. "So am I," I replied. The moment hung there between us, fragile, curious, heavy with everything that wasn't being said. She stood up slowly, gathering the glasses. "I should probably clean these up." I followed her to the sink, partly out of instinct, partly because I didn't want to sit there alone and let the silence swallow me. "Here, let me help," I offered. She raised an eyebrow. "What is it with you and helping me tonight?" I shrugged. "Guess I'm just good company." She smiled, and something flickered in her eyes. Not teasing, not maternal, just soft, present. She passed me a towel, and we moved around each other in that small kitchen space, careful but close. I reached for a glass at the same time she did, and our fingers brushed. It was nothing, but it was everything. Neither of us pulled away. Our hands stayed there for just a second too long. Then she looked at me, fully, not like someone looking at a guest, not like a mom, like a woman seeing a man. "Nate," she said, almost a whisper, "I shouldn't be this comfortable with you." I swallowed. "Do you want me to go?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I just didn't expect tonight to feel like this." We stood there for a few seconds longer. The kitchen felt warmer, closer. Finally, she exhaled and turned away, placing the glass on the rack. "I think I need to sit down." We returned to the table, but something had changed. Her posture was softer now, shoulders lowered, hair a bit looser around her face. She reached for the candle and moved it slightly closer to the center of the table. "I always forget how quiet the house gets," she said, "after he leaves." "I guess it's not so quiet now," I offered. She smiled. "No, it's not." Her eyes lingered on mine. She didn't look away this time. "I used to be afraid of quiet," she said. "Now I crave it. But tonight, this is different. It's not just quiet. It's still." I finished for her. She nodded. There was a long pause. Then she spoke again, barely audible. "You don't have to rush off. If you want to stay longer." I looked at the clock. It was past 11. "I probably should go," I said, even though I didn't want to. She smiled gently. "But you're not standing up." I laughed under my breath. "Neither are you." And then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Don't tell my son." Her eyes stayed on mine. No smirk, no irony, just truth. She stood slowly and walked over to the couch, curling one leg beneath her as she sat. The soft lamplight caught the curve of her face. She didn't invite me over, didn't gesture, but I followed anyway, and when I sat beside her, closer than before, she didn't move away. We just sat there, together, quiet, and something in the room exhaled with us. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, but in truth, it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Time had started to behave strangely, stretching and contracting around her presence beside me. Ava leaned back against the couch, her fingers loosely wrapped around one of the throw pillows. She wasn't trying to be seductive. She wasn't even looking at me, and maybe that's what made it feel more intimate than anything that came before. She was just there, unfiltered, real. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the air, mixing with the tick of the wall clock and the quiet crackle of the candle on the table. I sat beside her, arms resting on my knees, trying not to overthink every second. But it was impossible. Every glance, every breath, every shift of her body sent a jolt through me. She finally looked over at me. Her expression was unreadable. "You're quiet," she said softly. I nodded, just trying not to ruin the moment. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, more like an understanding. "It's okay to be here, Nate." "You mean here as in your couch? Or here as in with you?" She looked away, then back. "Both." That was the moment something inside me tilted. Not crashed, not exploded, just tilted, and I couldn't unfeel it. "I've never seen you like this before," I admitted. "Not like a mom. Not like Daniel's mom." She tilted her head. "And how do you see me now?" I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. My throat was tight. "Like a woman," I finally said. "One I want to stay near." Her breath caught just barely. "But I noticed." "I shouldn't like hearing that," she said. "But I do." We sat with that. The tension between us wasn't sharp. It was heavy, warm, magnetic. The kind that pulls rather than pushes. I turned slightly to face her, one leg folded beneath me. She mirrored the movement without realizing it, like we were syncing in some quiet choreography neither of us rehearsed. "I thought I'd be asleep by now," she said. "I thought I'd be gone by now." She smiled again. This time it reached her eyes. "You're still here. So are you." We were so close now. Close enough that I could see the small freckle just above her lip, the faint line of tiredness under her eyes, the soft glow on her cheek from the lamp. "You know," she said suddenly, "after my divorce, I promised myself I wouldn't blur the lines again. I spent too long erasing myself to make someone else comfortable. I don't want to be invisible anymore." "You're not invisible," I said quickly. "Not even close." She looked down at her hands, her fingers now toying with the fabric of the pillow. "You see me," she whispered. "That's what scares me." She wasn't flirting. She wasn't testing me. She was confessing. I shifted closer, barely, just enough for our knees to brush. "I'm not here to scare you," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were searching mine, careful, conflicted, curious. And then something in her softened, like she'd stopped fighting the part of her that didn't want to feel alone tonight. "I'm not asking you to stay," she said. "But if you do, it changes things." I swallowed. My voice felt like sandpaper. "I know." Her fingers reached out just a little and rested on my knee. Not a grab, not a pull, just presence. "I shouldn't," she said again. "But I don't want to be alone tonight." I covered her hand with mine, and for a moment we just sat there, breathing in the same space. She stood slowly. Her hand slipped from mine as she moved toward the hallway. She didn't say anything. She didn't turn around. I remained on the couch, frozen between decision and desire. My heart hammered. My mind raced. Was this wrong? Was this real? Did it matter? Then I heard it. Her voice soft as thread. Nate? I looked up. She stood in the hallway now, one hand resting on the doorframe of what I assumed was her bedroom. Don't tell my son, she whispered. Not a threat, not a joke, a plea, a secret wrapped in warmth and guilt and something almost like hope. I rose to my feet slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't speak. I walked toward her, pulse pounding behind my ribs. She stepped aside, allowing me into the room. The door didn't close behind us. Not all the way, but something else did. A chapter, a line, a version of who I was just hours earlier. The room was dim. One bedside lamp was on, casting golden light across the comforter. She stood beside the bed for a second, then sat at the edge. Her legs were folded beneath her. Her sweater hung off one shoulder. She looked small and quiet and peaceful. I don't know what this is, she said, but I don't want to lie about how it feels. You don't have to. She reached for my hand, slow and steady, and I gave it to her. There was no rush, no sudden kiss, no movie scene explosion. Just two people choosing stillness in a world that never slowed down. That night, we didn't fall apart or fall in love. We just fell into each other's presence. And for a few hours, the house stopped being silent. The first thing I noticed was the light. Not sunlight exactly, but that soft gray-blue glow that comes just before dawn, when everything looks quiet and half awake. I blinked a few times, disoriented, as my eyes adjusted to the unfamiliar room. Her room. I was lying on the far edge of the bed, still fully dressed, the blanket only half draped over me. The faint smell of vanilla lingered in the air, mingling with the warmth of her sheets. I turned my head slowly and saw her. Eva. She was curled on her side, her back to me, one arm tucked beneath the pillow, the other resting gently against her stomach. Her sweater had slipped a little farther off her shoulder in the night. A strand of hair clung to her cheek. She looked peaceful in a way I hadn't seen before, softer, unguarded, beautiful in a quiet, everyday kind of way. I stayed still, afraid to ruin it, afraid to breathe too loud. Because whatever that night had been, whatever that moment between us had meant, it felt fragile now, like glass resting on the edge of a table. My heart ached in a way I couldn't name. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or something else entirely? I slid out of the bed slowly, careful not to wake her. My shoes were still by the couch. I picked them up, moving through the hallway barefoot, like some teenage ghost trying not to exist in the wrong dimension. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. My hair was messy, my shirt wrinkled, but it wasn't just the outside that looked different. Something had shifted. I felt older somehow, heavier, like I'd stepped into a room I couldn't fully leave again. By the time I returned to the living room, the house had begun to stir, not with sound but with presence. The air wasn't still anymore. I could feel her wakefulness behind me, even before I heard her voice. You're up early. I turned. Ava stood at the edge of the hallway, wrapped in a robe this time, her hair loosely tied back. Her voice was husky, soft with sleep. Couldn't sleep, I said. She stepped into the kitchen and put on the kettle. Her movements were smooth, practiced. She didn't avoid looking at me, but she didn't seek my eyes either. It wasn't awkward. It was careful. I was afraid you'd leave without saying anything, she said after a pause. I thought about it. She looked over at me. But you didn't. No. Why not? I hesitated. Because last night wasn't nothing. She nodded slowly, turning back to the counter. It wasn't. The kettle began to hiss. She poured water into 2 mugs and slid one toward me. I took it without speaking. We sipped in silence for a while, both of us standing, both of us staring into the steam. Finally, she said, "I'm not sure what happens now." "Me neither." She looked at me. "Do you regret it?" "No." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "Neither do I." The relief that passed between us was quiet, but real, tangible. But then her eyes clouded again. "We can't pretend nothing happened." "I'm not trying to. But we also can't pretend it's simple." I nodded. "Because of Daniel." She swallowed. "He means everything to me, Nate. If he knew." "I know. I'm not ashamed," she said. "But I am scared." "Me too." She stepped around the counter and sat on the edge of the couch. Her robe folded over her knees. Her bare feet touched the cool tile. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "I didn't either. But it did." I sat beside her, closer than I should have, maybe, but not touching. She looked at me, not like the night before, not like something heavy was about to happen, just honest. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not unless you want me to." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Good." Another long silence. Then she added, "This doesn't have to become a thing, you know? We don't have to make promises or plans." I nodded. "I know. But..." I looked at her. "But..." She met my eyes, and for the first time that morning she smiled. "You can come back," she said. Something in my chest uncoiled. "I want to," I said. "Not just for what happened last night, but because being with you felt real, like something that mattered." She reached out and placed her hand on mine. Not in a desperate way, not in a possessive way, just steady. "I'm not sure where this goes," she said. "It doesn't have to go anywhere fast," I replied. She nodded. Then she stood, walked me to the door and opened it for me. The morning was bright now. The sun had risen while we were sitting in the quiet. I stepped outside but turned back before going. She was still there, still watching, still her. "Last night," I said. "I'll never forget it." "Good," she said softly. "Neither will I." And then, just before I walked away, she added, "But remember what I said, Nate, don't tell my son." I smiled. "I won't." But the truth? That secret didn't stay behind. It walked with me, sat in my chest, and I knew I'd carry it with me for a long, long time. Because whatever we were, whatever we became, it started in that quiet house, on a couch that wasn't mine, with a woman I thought I knew, until she let me see the part of her she never showed anyone, not even herself.
Bye bye.